They called her a promise that never came true, a label written in ink darker than her eyes. Fertile, the auctioneer said, as if a woman could be reduced to a word and sold by it. When the bids fell silent and the crowd turned away, she stood there alone, believing the whisper that had followed her since girlhood, that hope could be advertised but never believed. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to Moments of Love. And leave a like and comment if this story touches your heart. The market dust clung to her shoes, as if it knew she had nowhere else to go. She kept her chin lifted anyway. Her name was Layla, and she had learned long ago that dignity was something you carried inside when the world refused to carry it for you. Men had come before asking questions with sharp edges about her body, about babies she had not had, about promises her mother once made in a desperate season. When the answers disappointed them, they always left. She had been raised in a place where survival taught people to trade stories for bread after her mother died. An aunt tried to protect her by insisting that Lila's worth was not in what others said. But hunger makes liars of good intentions. And so the label followed her, pinned on by someone who needed coin more than truth. The cruel part wasn't the lie, it was the way people wanted to believe it when it suited them, and disbelieved it when it didn't. The cowboy arrived late, boots worn smooth by miles and patience. He wasn't handsome in the way songs promised. His face held the quiet of long mornings and longer nights, but his eyes were steady. He didn't push through the crowd or laugh with the men who laughed too easily. He stood back, watched, and waited. When the auctioneer's voice faltered and the crowd thinned, the cowboy stepped forward. He didn't ask the usual questions. He asked her name. Lila told him. He nodded as if names mattered more than labels. He asked if she was hungry. She didn't answer at first. Pride is stubborn when it's all you have left. He took off his hat and said, "Gentle as rain, I've got stew cooling in a pot, and an extra chair that doesn't like being empty." She followed him because kindness has a sound, and she heard it in his voice. His ranch was small, tucked against a bend in the river, where the water remembered the mountains. He showed her the room clean, simple, and said she could stay the night. No conditions, no promises. Just rest. Lila slept like someone who had been holding her breath for years, and finally let it out. Morning brought work, the honest kind that leaves your hands tired and your mind clear. She fed chickens, swept dust, learned the names of trees. The cowboy, his name was Eli, worked beside her without watching her, like a transaction. When she broke a bowl, he shrugged and said, "Bowls were made to be broken so hands could learn care." When she flinched at thunder, he told her the sky was only reminding the earth it was alive. Days folded. In 2 weeks, the town noticed. Of course, whispers have a way of walking faster than people. Some said Eli had bought a lie. Others said he was foolish. A few waited for the inevitable disappointment. Layla heard it all, but Eli never asked her to defend herself. He never asked her to be anything but present. One evening by the river, she told him the truth she had never told anyone about. The doctor years ago who had shaken his head, about the pain and the silence that followed, about the way hope had been taken from her and sold back with a price tag. She didn't ask for pity, she expected him to leave. Eli listened like listening was a craft he had practiced. When she finished, he skipped a stone across the water and said, "People think proof is something you owe them. I think proof is something you offer yourself." He didn't say it didn't matter. He said she mattered. Seasons turned. Lila learned to laugh without checking if it was allowed. Eli learned to let the quiet speak. They built a life out of small mercies. Warm bread, shared chores, the soft ritual of sitting side by side. At dusk, love arrived the way dawn does, not announced but unmistakable. When they married, it wasn't to prove anyone wrong. It was because choosing each other felt like choosing oxygen. The town kept watching when a year passed without a child. The whispers sharpened. Lila felt the old ache. Wake up, Eli felt it too. And one night, he said, "We don't have to answer them." She nodded and the knot in her chest loosened. Then in a spring heavy with blossoms, Lila grew tired in a new way. Her hands shook, her breath caught. The doctor's face this time held wonder instead of warning. When he told them, Lila cried like the market dust was finally washing away. Eli held her and laughed, a sound that startled birds into flight. The town heard the news and rushed to rewrite its story. Lila let them. She had learned that redemption doesn't need an audience. Their child arrived in a storm, loud and perfect as if announcing a new chapter to the sky itself. Lila held the tiny life and felt something heal that she hadn't known was still broken. Eli kissed her forehead and whispered thanks to her. To the river, to the long road that had brought them home. Years later, Lila would return to the market. Not to be sold, but to buy apples and watch people pass. She saw another girl standing where she once stood, shoulders squared against a world that felt too heavy. Lila walked over, said her name, asked if she was hungry. The girl's name was Mara, and she carried her fear the way Lila once had, tight against her ribs, careful not to spill it. Lila brought her home, fed her soup, showed her the spare room that still smelled faintly of cedar and calm. Eli nodded when Lila explained the way he always did, as if kindness were an old agreement they'd made and kept. Without needing to speak it aloud, Mara stayed the night, then another. Then the quiet rhythm of days wrapped around her too. Lila watched herself in the girl's small habits. The way Mara washed dishes twice, the way she flinched when voices rose, the way she apologized for breathing. Lila remembered how survival teaches people to shrink. She remembered how love teaches them to take up space again. The town noticed, as it always did. Some people smiled kindly, remembering the miracle they had celebrated years ago. Others tilted their heads, measuring, waiting. Lila felt the old ache flicker, but it didn't root. She had learned that other people's doubts didn't get to decide her days. Eli taught Mara how to mend a fence. Lila taught her how to knead bread until it forgave you. Their child, now bright-eyed with laughter like bells, clung to Mara's skirts and declared her family. Before anyone else could argue, Mara cried into Lila's shoulder and said she didn't deserve it. "You don't earn family," Lila said softly. "You recognize it weeks past." Mara told her story in pieces as if it were fragile glass. She had been promised work, safety, a future. What she found was a ledger with her name written beside numbers that didn't add up to dignity. She escaped when she could. She didn't know where to go. The market had seemed like a place where decisions were made quickly. She hadn't known how slow kindness could be and how deep. One afternoon, a man came to the ranch. He wore a smile that had practiced being convincing. He spoke of arrangements and rights and debts. Lila stood in the doorway with flour on her hands and her heart steady. Eli stood beside her, quiet as a wall. When the man reached for Mara, Lila stepped forward. "No." She said it was a small word, but it carried years of learning. The man sneered, "You don't know what she's worth." Lila met his eyes. "I know exactly what she's worth. And it's not for sale." He left with threats trailing behind him like dust. The ranch felt different afterward, brighter as if the air itself approved. That night, Mara asked if miracles were contagious. Lila smiled and said miracles were just what happened when people stopped pretending they couldn't help. Summer swelled, the river sang. Mara learned to stand taller. She learned to look people in the eye. She learned that work done with respect fills you differently than work done with fear. She learned that promises don't have to be loud to be kept. One evening, as the sun burned gold along the hills, Mara told Lila she wanted to leave. Not because she had to, but because she could. There was a school in the next town. A woman there had offered her a place to learn letters and numbers, and how to choose. Lila felt the familiar pinch of goodbye, and recognized it for what it was: pride. They packed a bag together. Eli slipped a coin into Mara's pocket without ceremony. The child hugged her hard and said she'd come back to visit. Mara knelt eye level and promised she would when she left. The house echoed for a while. Lila sat on the porch and watched the dust settle. Eli brought 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. "You did good," he said. "We did," Lila corrected, smiling. Years moved the way years do, quietly, insistently. The child grew into a person who asked big questions and listened to the answers. The ranch weathered storms and droughts and the small losses that come with loving anything long enough. Lila learned that fear doesn't disappear. It just loses its authority. One winter, a letter arrived. Mara's handwriting was careful and brave. She had learned quickly she had chosen well. She was helping others now the way she'd been helped. And she wanted to say thank you. Not for saving her, but for seeing her. Lila folded the letter and held it to her chest. Outside, snow softened the world into something gentle on a spring morning. Not unlike the one when everything had changed. Lila returned to the market with apples and a basket of bread. She didn't look for pain anymore. She looked for possibility. She found it as she often did, in the eyes of someone who hadn't yet learned they could be chosen. She offered a name. She offered a meal. She offered the kind of kindness that doesn't ask to be believed. Because love, she had learned, isn't proven by labels or miracles or the approval of a crowd. It's proven in the quiet decision to stand beside someone and say, "Again and again you belong.